So what do you know about Danilo Blando?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, Ricky. Danilo's gonna testify against you tomorrow.
He's the witness they've been hiding.
Man, ain't no way they flipped Danilo, man.
Sit down
Nah.
and listen to what he has to say.
They didn't flip anyone. Blando was working for the government the entire time.
You for real?
Yeah.
Look here, man, he was 1,000 times heavier than I'll ever be. I couldn't sell it fast enough to keep up with supply.
Slow down. You mean demand?
No, I mean supply. I was buying 100 kilos a week, selling $3 million a day, and still couldn't get rid of that inventory fast enough, man. It was raining coke.
Allegedly, Ricky.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Look here, man, I gave him $6 million a week, allegedly.
That's impossible.
Is it?
How do you sell that much cocaine on the street?
Look here, man, we used to cook it with baking soda. We called it Ready Rock. Powder was for rich folks. Look here, man, I was just the elf. Blandon, Santa Claus.
Hello, brothers, back again. The clip you just saw was from the movie Kill the Messenger. And in it, you saw a scene where Ricky Ross is confessing his involvement in one of the most heinous acts against the black community since Jim Crow. He is a tragic character that played an important role of unleashing this scourge upon the black community and wreaking havoc with the black family, whose damaging effects is still being felt 30 years later. To be sure, he's not the only factor or the only character in this drama, but he is an important one, and he's one that we will be exploring in this particular episode of what happened to the black community. For almost 100 years, black men and black men being married was fairly constant. Even before 1960, they were more likely to be married than white men. Black marriage even survived the war on poverty and welfare. But as the chart shows, when crack cocaine and Ricky Ross's career began in 1980, that trend was broken, and you can see the long line upward and the breakdown of marriage. You can see almost the same sort of trend in the black community with the black women and the never married rate. Even though the war on poverty and feminism caused an upward trend, it was nothing like the upward spike after the 1980s. Here's another chart talking about the black family, talking about the percentage of black men never marrying and how it correlates with the black prison population, both of which were fairly stable throughout the majority of this nation's history, surviving some of the worst times in America. It's obvious that the war on drugs and the crack cocaine epidemic in particular completely changed the black family as we know it. Nothing before and nothing since has had as profound an effect on the black family in America.
Talking to people in the ghetto, one dealer's name always came up when talking about crack's popularity. Freeway Ricky Ross became known as the Walmart of crack. Ricky's story has become as legendary as Tony Montana and Scarface, but with an even more bizarre twist. Ricky, who is currently serving time in the Texarkana Federal Prison, is scheduled for release in 2013. The prison denied me access with a camera, so I started interviewing Ricky over the prison payphone.
You know, a lot of people don't know what it's like to come in a house and there's nothing to eat. You know, to go to a supermarket and walk through the store and eat out of the cookies and things of that nature just to have something to eat. Cocaine came along, you know, and gave me a new horizon, I would say.
There's a new epidemic. Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack.
I remember clearly one day in the late 80s, every single news network simultaneously running an identical news alert about the new, incredible, powerful, unbelievably cheap drug that was to sweep the nation.
This is crack cocaine.
Soon, every single black person living in the ghetto would sell his own mother for another hit of crack cocaine. It was like watching a strategically engineered ad campaign. Talk about perfect product placement. Did we mention it's cheap and strong and very addictive? Only $5 now, so stay away from it.
Let there be no mistake. This stuff is poison.
Crack cocaine epidemic. Crack cocaine epidemic.
Few street-level dealers have ever reached the legendary status of Freeway Rick, with distribution that rivaled many Fortune 500 companies.
Freeway Ricky Ross was a young, aggressive, savvy, streetwise marketer who started selling cocaine, and then suddenly some major sources opened up for him.
At the height of Rick's operation, he had over 40 full-time employees in Los Angeles alone. He had cook houses, cash counting houses, rock houses, decoy houses, and even a house he lived in.
Cooking was always our most vulnerable and our most time-consuming thing to do. Usually you could put it in like a big Samsonite suitcase. You could put 100 keys just about in one of those, or maybe 2 of them. So that's what we normally cooked every night, like 100 kilos.
Rick shares some good down-home cooking tips about rocking it up.
Well, the way we did it is I basically was a chef. You know, I did all the stirring. I would tell the guys to mix. Like one guy, he would be standing there, and I would tell him, add more baking soda, pour more water, you know, that type of situation. So it was more, yeah, it was like an assembly line.
I know this is nothing to joke about, but Rick is your all-American opportunist. And as the media told us, crack was now the big new opportunity.
You know, we had houses where you basically would go up to the window and it would be served right out the window, kind of like the way McDonald's does it, I guess. Because we had houses in so many different locations. Basically, you know, I wanted a location. I wanted it to be convenient for the people, you know, where they wouldn't have to drive for. It was kind of like marketing, I guess you would say.
The gangs evolved, and the gangs were a great business venture. They're basically marketing tools. That's really what they were. And they were quietly promoted behind the scenes.
And you tell yourself, I'll just take $10 or $5 and buy me a little hit to sustain myself, to hold myself off. But after you get that little hit, you want more, and you want more, and you want more. Then that's called chasing the rock.
Drugs can obviously cause horrible addictions, but the drug war creates black markets, creating an even more dangerous addiction for money.
Well, I became addicted to the money and also the power too, I believe, you know, to be in charge and to have people look up to you and talk highly of you.
Big names like Freeway, Rick, going down. People actually want to be like him because they don't think about drugs, they just think about the money.
It was at his heyday.
The average week would at least be $2 to $3 million, almost guaranteed. Some days we would have $2 and $3 million days.
After Freeway Rick was arrested, an investigative journalist by the name of Gary Webb uncovered a link that connected him back to the Nicaraguan Contra movement.
I read Dark Alliance. I got a copy personally from Gary Webb himself. And to read the book, it was fascinating for me, you know, to find out that I was connected with the CIA and all these high-powered people up in the government.
Home values in South Central Los Angeles were tanking. People owed $100,000 on their home. The place was a war zone, dead bodies in the backyard, prostitutes in the front, drive-by shooting. I mean, it was horrible. And people walked on their mortgages because they couldn't sell the houses. And tens of thousands of homes were moved literally for 10 and 20 cents on the dollar after people abandoned their mortgages. We call that ethnic cleansing.
There was a greater plan to put churches, to put liquor stores, gun shops, and cocaine, drugs into the ghetto, into the neighborhoods, and drive the prices down. And they pretty much did a good job of that.
Real estate in California, which we consider Compton, Watts, East LA, South Central, where the drug-infested gang killing highest rates in the country, and families really start moving out of the inner cities to way out. I'm talking about 70 miles out of LA to get rid of. I'm talking about the farmland where they promising people that they're gonna build up jobs and everything, especially like in the 80s. There's a big thing about moving to Moreno Valley. You're gonna have all these big corporations come in. It never happened. People actually moved out there, end up losing everything because the big corporations never came. And then a lot of investors came back here and start buying property for so cheap prices, and now the property value is sky high. You can't even afford to live in Compton and Washington without spending $300,000 for a home. that my mother then paid $9,000 for.
I think the prevailing view on Wall Street is anyone stupid enough to buy drugs deserves to die. And if you can make money from them while they're doing it, that's great. And if that's imposing a crime wave on a community away from Wall Street, that's okay. There's no drug crime on Wall Street.
When he introduced me, he didn't know the problems that he was going to be causing. I didn't know the problems that I was going to be causing. But I didn't want to be in poverty, and I didn't care what it took, even if it meant sacrificing my life. That I no longer wanted to be in poverty. I no longer wanted to be hungry. I didn't want to see my mom struggling and my brothers and sisters struggling. So when I got the opportunity to get involved with selling drugs, I jumped at it. I felt that being able to make only $100 a day, because I never thought about making thousands of dollars a day, but $100 a day was enough for me to go from being anti-drugs, totally against drugs, to saying, okay, I embrace drugs. And not only that, I found out that a lot of the things that they had been teaching me about drugs was false. Like the commercial where you see on there and they fry egg and say that this egg is your brain. Well, I found out that that wasn't true, because I saw friends that was using drugs and it didn't seem like it was affecting them at all. It was only later, after I got into drugs heavy, that I found out that some people got hooked on cocaine. But that was a few years after I was involved. When I first started, there was no crack addicts. There was nobody on the streets pushing baskets. There was nobody that quit their job to use cocaine. I saw this a few years later. So when I first started, it wasn't the way that it is right now. So when they paint this picture of me as this monster that set out to destroy my community, I don't understand why they do it.
For this job that needs to be done, because, I mean, if you haven't lived this life, it's like an experiment. You know, my life has been an experiment. And had I not been through this experiment, then I wouldn't know what happened. You know, most people don't know what happened in South Central. They don't know how you get started selling drugs. They don't know how you get out of selling drugs. They don't know how you can go from being illiterate at 28 years old to being as literate as I am now. You know, basically, I do law work. You know, like I said, I'm filing my paperwork today in my lawsuit.
What role did the U.S. government play in bringing crack cocaine into LA's poor black neighborhoods?
The government needed this money to fight this war over in Nicaragua against the Sandinistas. Russia had gave the Sandinistas $100 million to fight with. Congress had cut off all the money from the Contras. So now the Sandinistas had an advantage. Reagan and Bush had made the Contras their pet peeve. They felt that if Russia took over Nicaragua, they would be too close to America. They would be in our backyard. I believe that they felt it was more valuable to sacrifice a particular sector of America and a race of people in America in order to save the whole country. So they let these guys open up pipelines. Danilo Blandon, Norman Nessis, and the rest of the crew that worked with the Nicaraguan connection. Because I knew about 10 or 15 different Nicaraguans that was all inside of this, you know, Contra organization that was selling drugs. So by them allowing these guys, or basically turning a blind eye, because I don't think the government necessarily gave them the drugs or whatnot, but in a sense they sanctioned it because they turned a blind eye. They knew that these guys were selling drugs, but they did absolutely nothing about it. I also believe that had they not let these guys sell drugs, it's possible that I would have never become a drug dealer.
What does that say about our government when they're looking the other way while a deadly substance is coming into our communities for the sake of fighting a communist regime in Central America?
Well, it says that our government will sacrifice its people to accomplish a goal. And this is not the first time that they've done that. We've known numerous times in our history where they have sacrificed, especially the black man.
In that case, it's tough to hear that the ends justify the means.
They felt that it was more valuable for them to keep Russia out.
I think what we have to do is define and understand what these messages are that are coming out of the music. If the messages are excessively violent and negative to society, then we need to talk about them and talk about them honestly. How did we get those messages?
Really, it's a cry out because it's like genocide going on there. You're losing a whole generation of people that could help contribute not only to this country, to this world. And they're crying out about it through that music.
There's such a difference now in terms of the attitude of rap music from the message to today. The message still implied hope.
Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And that's just like 10 years ago, you know what I'm saying? So it's like the music has a message behind it. It's telling you, get it right. We ain't standing for this no more.
Well, 10 years, 12 years really later, with the absence of anybody paying attention to Melly Mel when he was saying, don't push me, we have kids who are saying, I don't care. I'll buck you down, I'll do whatever I have to survive, because nobody cares about me, so why should I care about anybody else?
Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat came my tech from the bushes. I blast with no heart, cause I'm heartless and I tread.
Poverty in America's inner cities has often led to crime, partly due to the lack of opportunities for the kids growing up there. But when in the early 80s the government dismantled many of the social programs that helped support these minority communities, the kids who made and listened to rap music were left with little else to do but hang out and seek support in gangs. Then, into this cultural and economic vacuum came the crack trade.
So we start to hear now even more in the music, a different development, almost like despair.
The crack cocaine trade brought with it a lot more money, more greed, and more violence, especially within the gangs.
Before we had people that was teaching in New York, you had the X-Clan, you had Public Enemy, you had KRS, and who was putting pictures that was waking up people. Then this whole thing came from the West Coast, which I'm sorry to say was negativity. That's right. Those are two my brothers, but they was teaching negativity.
New York rappers do a freestyle. They rap about lots of different topics, and it's fun, but all my records always have guns and drugs and criminal slang versus rap slang. So that's what I call it, the G style, the gangster style of rap.
Got a knot in my pocket weighing at least $1,000. Gold on my neck, my pistol's close in hand.
6 in the morning, police at my door. That's accredited to be the first gangster rhyme.
You had everybody from New York rapping about my Adidas and my chain, this and South Bronx and everything. I wanted to put my city on the map. I'm from Compton. I know about Compton. This is what I've been through. This is what I want to rap about. So we formed NWA.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube. From the gang called niggas with attitudes. When I'm called off, I got a sawed off. Squeeze the trigger and bodies are hauled off.
From the success of NWA in that region, we also started to see rappers represent their own regions. Two Live Crew represented the bawdiness of Miami with the bass sound. Ghetto Boys represented the blues influence, rough life in the different wards of Houston. The only problem is that there were intense problems going on in these neighborhoods at the same time, so it becomes a very heavy mix of music and also the neighborhood politics.
And welcome to the ghetto.
When I walk outside of my door, I don't see no flowers and no, you know what I'm saying, and no ocean and nothing. It's not a pretty sight. So I just do my poetry about what I see.
I'm letting you know right now that the establishment is using hip hop to prime these kids for a life that's gonna send them to prison, just like they did with me. See, when I was coming up, there was Superfly, Tequila Sunrise, Scarface, all these movies to make you think that you could start with nothing and then you could have the whole world at the palm of your hand. Only that there was no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It was a set of handcuffs and shackles. And you want to know why the CIA symbol is behind me? Because they were the guys behind me when I was selling drugs.
This concludes the chapter on what happened on the ground to the black family. In our next episode, we're going to touch on the why And we're going to touch on it from the point of the manager's perspective of why certain things are done and why they're done. For those that want to know and those that want to learn, hang with me in this series because we're going to go deep. And some things won't be as entertaining as maybe this particular chapter was. You can't solve the problem with the what or the how. You have to understand the why. And in the next chapter, we're going to go into the why. And as always, comments, questions are always welcome. Let's keep the discussion going.